Hello and welcome back to Recapped Movie. Today, we will review a romance fantasy movie titled Cinderella. The movie begins. We see Cinderella Ella. She grew up in her parents' mansion where her father's family had lived for generations. She spends her days feeding and talking with the animals, especially Gus and Jack. One day, Ella learned that a fairy godmother looked after her just like she looked after the animals on her farm. Her father was a wealthy merchant who often traveled. One day, Ella's mother tells her that she must have the courage to remain kind before revealing she is very sick and will soon die. The family shares one last hug as they weep and Ella's mother dies. We then see Ella has grown into a beautiful young woman who has kept her promise to her mother to always be kind and courageous. Ella's father, however, has grown lonely and unhappy. Later, he tells Ella about a widow he has taken an interest in. Ella is not happy with the idea but accepts that her father needs someone. Soon after, the widow arrives with her daughters, Anastasia and Drusilla, and a cat named Lucifer. Ella is thrilled to meet them all, but they just make fun of her. That night, the family and all members of the house celebrate with a big party, but Ella is not happy. A while later, Ella joins her father in his study where he informs her that he is leaving in the morning for a few months. Ella is unhappy with the news because he has barely returned from his last trip. He asks what she would like him to bring her when he returns. Ella's new stepsisters had asked for parasols and lace, but Ella tells him all she wants is for him to come back. He confesses that he misses Ella's mother just as much as she does. Ella's stepmother hears this and becomes jealous and walks away. The next morning, Ella, her sisters and stepmother bid her father farewell. As he leaves for his trip, Ella cries when he disappears down the road. However, returning to the lonely house, her sisters suddenly grow cold toward her. Also, her stepmother instructs her to call her madam. Meanwhile, Anastasia and Drusilla fight over sharing a room. Ella suggests they share her room instead, since hers is one of the biggest rooms in the mansion. Ella's stepmother moves her into the attic with all the other junk in the house. Ella tries her best to make herself comfortable in the attic and soon discovers that her most friends live there too. She is thrilled to have the company. The next morning, Ella wakes up early to do the chores and help the kitchen staff to prepare breakfast, while her stepsisters sleep all day. Ella is miserable and the only comfort she ever has is her father's letters, believing he will return soon and things will get better again. However, one afternoon Ella and the rest of her step-family receive news that her father has died due to illness. Ella's stepmother is devastated, believing their lives are ruined, but the stepsisters are not concerned at all and are only sad they won't get their parasols and lace. Ella bursts into tears. Ella's mother dismisses the house staff because there is no longer money to pay them. The step-family mistreats her, and since there are no more maids or servants, Ella is made to do all the chores and only given their table scraps to eat. Ella's only friends were the mice and she treated them very kind. One night, when the attic was too cold for her to sleep in, she slept by the fireplace instead and ended up with charcoal all over her face. The next morning, while serving them breakfast, her stepsisters and stepmother make fun of her for her dirty face and rename her Cinderella. One afternoon, Cinderella takes her horse into the forest and rescues a stag from the prince and his men. However, Cinderella does not yet know who the prince is and just assumes he is an apprentice. The prince introduces himself as Kit, but Cinderella refuses to tell him her name. She then learns he is treated much better than her at the palace and this makes her sad. Cinderella tells him not to worry about how she is being treated because they must have courage and be kind. The prince is struck by her words and is instantly attracted to her. Cinderella then begs the prince not to hunt the stag anymore. Moved by Cinderella's kindness and words, he agrees. They then ride off along different paths, smiling and looking forward to seeing each other again. At the palace, Prince tells his father about his encounter with the woman in the forest. King, however, tells him he cannot marry a commoner. As a prince, he has to marry a princess. The prince is then prepared for a portrait sitting, which will be sent out as an invitation to a ball where the prince will choose a bride for himself. The duke scolds him for letting the stag go, quotes Cinderella's words. However, everyone looks at him confused. The duke reminds him that theirs is a small kingdom among many great states, and he must marry a princess to keep everything strong. The prince then requests that invitations be sent to all, not just nobility, hoping that this will be a chance to see Cinderella again. The king agrees, seeing this as the win for both, a ball for the people and a princess for the prince. At the market, an announcement is made that there is to be a ball at the palace in 2 weeks, where the prince will choose his bride. Also tells that the king has ordered every noble or common is to attend. Cinderella hears this and rushes home excited. Meanwhile, her stepsisters are more than thrilled at the prospect of meeting the prince, and their mother charges them with the mission of winning the prince's heart. She orders Cinderella to hurry to the seamstress to have ball gowns made for her and her daughters, but not for Cinderella. At the palace, the prince is distracted by thoughts of Cinderella. During his fencing training, the captain says that if Cinderella is as charming as the prince says, she will surely be able to convince the king to let Prince marry her. That night, as Cinderella mends her mother's old dress to wear to the ball, her stepmother and stepsisters come and tear it apart. Her stepmother orders her not to attend the ball, as she fears Cinderella will ruin her daughter's chances of meeting the prince. Cinderella runs out to the yard and cries. Then suddenly, a strange woman appears saying she is Cinderella's fairy godmother. Cinderella cannot believe her eyes. Her fairy godmother insists that she attend the ball and transforms a pumpkin into a beautiful golden carriage. She then turns the mice into horses, a goose into a chauffeur, and some lizards into coachmen. She then then warns Cinderella that the magic will run out by midnight before transforming Cinderella's dress into a beautiful gown with glass slippers. Finally, she casts a spell on Cinderella to make her unrecognizable to her stepsisters and stepmother, and then she hurries off to the ball. The ball is filled with maidens and princesses from near and far, but the prince is only interested in the forest beauty. Even the king is curious to meet this maiden who had won his son's heart, but it seems like she won't come. Meanwhile, Cinderella's stepmother introduces herself and her daughters to the Grand Duke, hoping to gain the prince's favor, but he is not interested. At long last, Cinderella arrived, the most beautiful maiden at the ball. Everyone wants to know who she is, thinking she must be a princess, but no one knew her name or what kingdom she had come from. Prince is thrilled to see her and they dance all night. Cinderella's stepmother learns the princess caught the eye of a princess and storms off in anger. The prince later leads Cinderella to a secret garden and confesses his feelings for her, but before Cinderella could tell him her name, the clock struck that it was almost midnight. Cinderella remembers the words of her fairy godmother and hurries off before the magic runs out. She accidentally bumps into the king and tells him how much his son loves him. On her way out, Cinderella loses one of her glass slippers as she runs down the stairs. She enters her carriage and zooms off. The king's men charge after but could not reach her. Cinderella's carriage and coach then return to what they really are, as the magic wears off, but she keeps the remaining glass slipper back at the palace. As the king is about to draw his last breath, he sends for his son. He tells him to marry for love rather than for the kingdom's advantage. Back at Cinderella's mansion, her stepmother begins to suspect that Cinderella was the beautiful maiden at the ball and watches her carefully. The next day, when the king passes away, the prince makes a decree that the maiden whose foot fits the lost glass slipper would be his bride. The Grand Duke insists that the prince should marry a princess, but he refuses. The search for the mystery woman begins and word reaches Cinderella that the prince wants to marry her. She hurries to retrieve the other of the glass slippers but discovers her stepmother has found out her secret. She takes the glass slipper and locks Cinderella in the attic before going to make a deal with the Grand Duke. That would make her a duchess and allow her daughters to marry respectable men, as long as she keeps Cinderella's identity a secret. Meanwhile, the prince visits all the maidens in the land, but no one's foot fits the glass slipper. They arrive at Cinderella's home and the stepmother asked her daughters to try the glass slipper on, but it does not fit either of them. Just as the Grand Duke and the captain are about to leave, they hear Cinderella singing from afar and order her stepmother to show her to them. But she insists that Cinderella is only her servant, but she comes out. Cinderella's stepmother forbids her from trying on the glass slipper, but the captain insists using his authority to make it happen. The stepmother becomes angry knowing her deal with Grand Duke will soon be void, and she and her daughters will remain in debt and poverty. Cinderella tries on the glass slipper, and it fits. The prince is overjoyed to have found her and asked her to marry him. Cinderella agrees, and before she leaves, she tells her stepmother and stepsisters that she forgives them. However, her forgiveness is not enough to prevent them and the Grand Duke from being banished from the kingdom forever. Cinderella and prince marries and she becomes the queen. The new king and queen are the kindest and fairest rulers of the kingdom, and all their subjects adore them, and they lived happily ever after. That is all for today. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. It helps us a lot.